Hey, Liza, thank you so much for being here today. We're super excited to get to interview you. I would love if you could introduce yourself.
Hey there. So my name is Liza Snow. I am a debuting romantic suspense author. I've been self-publishing for probably 7.5 years now. But this is a debut pen. It's a brand new pen for me. And I've been writing romance the whole entire time. I love writing romance. It's my jam. And outside of that, in my author career, I live in Florida with my husband and my three animal children. I have two dogs and a cat. And we live about 10 minutes from the beach. In fact, I went for a sunrise walk this morning, and I can watch rocket launches from my backyard, which is pretty cool. And I'm a coffee connoisseur. That's my other big thing. So, but yep, that's me in a nutshell.
Love that. I would love if you could tell us what your book's about.
Sure. So my book is called Obedience. It is the first in a four-book series, four-book series called Ties That Bind. It's a romantic suspense, as I said, and it's a student-teacher romance. It sets up as a student-teacher romance, and it's between a world-renowned silk aerialist named Chandler Moreau and his protege student, Cassandra Blackstone. And so basically, the book takes place in this really old kind of Hogwarts-esque circus school, which is a pretty neat setting. And then it also takes place in the sister circus, which is Cirque du Lys. And it basically is just a real slow burn student teacher romance. It's age gap romance. Some of the other tropes in it are kind of grumpy sunshine. You got the grumpy guy and the sunshine girl. You got the rich guy, poor girl trope. And yeah, like I mentioned, it's definitely a slow burn. It goes into the romance really slow, and then the second half of the book is kind of more into the suspense and setting up for the rest of the series. So, yep, that's basically it in a nutshell.
Love it. What inspired you to write your book?
So like I said, I've been publishing for 7.5 years. And so I used to live near Sarasota, Florida, which is over on the West Coast. And there's a museum in Sarasota called the Ringling Brothers Museum, like the Ringling Circus. And they have all sorts of circus art, and it's really cool. And then it's right on the water. So I would go over there and I would write sometimes. And one day I just felt really inspired to go and check out the museum. I didn't really do that, but I went and walked through the museum, and there was this woman that started talking to me, and her name was Cassandra. And she pronounced it Cassandra. Chandler pronounces it Cassandra in my book. But anyway, but yeah, her name was Cassandra. And we got to talking, and she told me she was a silk aerialist in a traveling circus that was in Sarasota at the time. And she was just a really fascinating person, had a lot of really cool stories. We ended up going and getting lunch together. And when she left me that day, she was like, "You better write a book about silk aerialists, because I haven't read a romance about silk aerialists and I want one. And the character better be named Cassandra." So that ended up happening, but I didn't actually start writing that book until last year in September. I started. But yeah, it started brewing in 2019 and just kind of went from there. So,
Love that. When you were writing your book, who were you thinking of when it comes to who the book is for?
um, I kind of, well, a lot of times I write it like books that I would enjoy. For starters, I have a feel for certain audiences just because I have a little bit of background writing romance. So I kind of knew I'm very much a student teacher romance fan. So I was very much writing for that audience for sure. And there's a series called the Hunted series by Ivy Smoke. And that was my first foray into student teacher romance. And so I like a lot of my book. If people like that book, they're definitely going to love Obedience, because it's that same kind of setup, and she has a lot of the suspense elements going on in it too. And so I definitely was catering towards the student teacher romance crowd. But I also like catering to people that don't want a traditional romance, that don't want one of those, like they get released once a month, kind of just short and sweet deal. I write a little bit uh off the beaten path, I guess, a little, and that's what everybody's been telling me, or the majority of people have been telling me, that my book's a little bit different, but that I kind of thrive on that. I like it to be a little bit interesting and not what you expected to read. So yeah, that's pretty much, those are who I keep in mind when I'm writing.
Love that. So you've touched on this next question, but how long have you been writing and what made you really start?
So I have been writing just for fun and enjoyment since probably, I mean, I did it even when I was little, but when I actually got serious and started writing books, it was probably in high school. And I had a young adult book that I wrote, and it was kind of inspired Harry Potter and then meets X-Men meets, what was the other one, at Ender's Game. So like I really love science fiction and fantasy novels. That's kind of my, outside of reading romance, that's my other genre that I like to read. And so I had this idea of, like, Hogwarts in space with like these like supernatural extraterrestrials that had extra powers. And so I had this idea for a while and wrote half of the draft but never did anything with it, but I did it all through high school. And then in 2017, a friend of mine, her name was Amanda, she introduced me to this kind of small group of readers that are really voracious readers and really love romance, and they the market was undersaturated and they really liked getting new stories. And she's like, you should write some for this audience. I'm being vague here because I'm not telling my other pen names yet, quite yet. I might, but not right the second. But she kind of pushed me, so I published my first book in 2017, and surprisingly it did really well. So from there, yeah, it just made sense. I really liked it, and I can't see myself. I do have a 9 to 5. I'm a marketer for my 9 to 5 job, and I absolutely adore my 9 to 5 job. But just as far as like fulfilling job, this is what I'm meant to do, I think. So especially after that, that was very validating. And yeah, that's been that way ever since, and just kind of took off. So.
Love that. What is your schedule like when you are writing a book?
So it kind of has adapted. When I had my old pen name, I was full time for a while writing, and I didn't have a job. But last year, I started working as a marketer, a digital marketer, and so I have that regular 9 to 5. So my schedule had to kind of adapt. So I've become a really, really early bird now. I get up at 4 a.m. To start writing, and I do it every day. And I set aside 2.5 hours to write. I'll go get a coffee, and I do this like really weird routine where I'll go for a drive for a few minutes and listen to music and kind of get in the zone. And then I come back and I do sprints and write for 2.5 hours before work. And then in the evenings, I've been doing my marketing stuff, which is, every author will tell you, is the bane of their existence. But and I am a marketer for my day job, and I told my boss I absolutely hate marketing my book. It is like pulling teeth. But yeah, so that's kind of, I'm a morning writer. That's typically my schedule, and I have my coffee ready to go and sit down and do my sprints, and then we're good to go. So
Love it. What do you need in your writing space to help you stay focused?
coffee. And then I generally I listen to music when I'm writing, like ambient sounds or like acoustic music that doesn't have any lyrics to it. Sometimes, so it's been interesting enough lately. This is sort of going sidetrack, but I did my Obedience has a full cast narrated audiobook that came out in tandem with the ebook and paperback. And so I hear my narrators now all the time when I'm writing, and I've never wrote a series before. So I've had audiobooks produced before, but never written a series. So now I'm working on the redrafts for the second book, and I hear my narrators narrating all the time when I'm writing, which is very frustrating when I'm writing a steamy scene of all things. So I've gotten like now I have a playlist explicitly for when I'm writing steamy scenes so that I turn it crank it up really, really loud. And it has lyrics, some of the songs do, but I'll crank it up super loud so that I can't hear the narrators in my head while I'm writing because it's so distracting. But yeah, music and coffee are my two things that are absolute musts for my writing space.
Love that. So I'm pretty sure I know the answer to part of this question, but what's your favorite writing snack or drink?
Well, coffee is my drink of choice, and then I also like seltzer waters a lot. So like Polars and LaCroix and stuff. I my husband makes fun of me because I drink way too many throughout the week, but that's how I get my water is drinking those seltzers. But yeah, between that and coffee, that's literally what I have on my desk over here is coffee and seltzer water. And then as far as snacks go, it's really highly dependent. I like munching on popcorn a lot of times. That's a pretty good snack, but like half of it goes to my dogs. They like stealing my popcorn. And it just depends, I guess. I'm not really particular as far as snacks go. And honestly, a lot of times when I'm writing or I'm really like hyper focused on my book, I don't even think about eating. I the coffee's on the brain because I absolutely like fuel on coffee, so that's a an absolute must. But as far as food, it's just my mood. It's mood dependent, I guess. So depends on the day.
Love that. What type of books do you personally enjoy reading?
So I'm a big sci-fi fantasy reader. My favorite book of all time is Dune by Frank Herbert. It's a very classic sci-fi novel, and I highly recommend it to anybody that likes science fiction. And I generally, if anybody recommends a science fiction book or a fantasy book, I will check it out. I also like young adult books a lot of times. Those are pretty fun for me to read. And then I also read romance. And my particular favorites in the romance genres are student teacher romances, forbidden romances. I like age gap romances. Pretty much everything that I wrote in this book, I enjoy. So that's part of the reason why I did what I did. If I have to stare at it for an insane amount of time, I want to like what I'm doing. So yeah, but that's kind of my faves.
Love it. Are there any books or authors that inspired you to become a writer?
Yeah, so the friend that I talked about earlier, Amanda, who pushed me into actually publishing, she's an author and she is absolutely fabulous. And I'm kind of sad because she stopped writing. And I keep trying to push her to write again because she's so good. But she definitely was my inspiration for self publishing and has been kind of when I published this book, I sent it to her and I'm like, I need you to read this and tell me you're proud of me. Because I'm like, you're like my idol, and I need you to be like proud of me for this book because this is my baby, my favorite book I've ever written, and please love it. And she did. But yeah, she was definitely my inspiration. And then just like the Frank Herbert who wrote Dune is a pretty big inspiration for me just because it's such a classic book. I definitely am not the type of person that will ever write something that prolific ever. Like I'm a pretty simplistic writer. I feel like I'm very good at telling stories, but I'm not very poetic all the time. I'm good at like telling a good story, I think. Those are always inspirational to me too, that people that are poetic that can come up with these really neat things, because sometimes it'll just spark things for me by reading stuff like that. So yeah, it's those two primarily, I think.
Love that. What books did you grow up reading? Did you have an all-time favorite?
Okay. So I grew up again. I when I was little, I was still a sci-fi nerd. I there was a book series. So the first big book series that I got into, it was called Animorphs, and it was this really like kind of off the wall series about these kids that met an alien that gave them powers to be able to morph into animals. And they had like a 2-hour time limit or something like that, and then they had to morph back into human form. But it was literally, there was like 42 books in the series or something like that, and it was absolutely fabulous. I was addicted to it. I read every single one of them. They were fabulous. I read Goosebumps, was another big one I grew up on that I really, really liked reading. Goosebumps. And my mom was a dog trainer growing up, and she had a kennel, and she would train or have classes in the evenings. And I remember I would get through a Goosebumps book in that 1 hour class period. I would read it so fast and it would be so good. I would just like zip through it. And then the other big book series growing up was when Harry Potter first came out. I was elementary school, and I remember I went to the library and got on the waiting list to get it, and it was the whole month wait to get on the waiting list. You had to wait for a whole month, and I just devoured that book and absolutely loved it. And then we were those people that went to the midnight releases every time the new books came out. So yeah, those were probably my big childhood reads, were those books.
Love that. On the opposite oh, Patrick. On the opposite side of that, now as an adult, what are your favorite series or authors that if they have something come out, you're gonna automatically grab it?
So again, like if it's anything sci-fi or fantasy related, and it catches my eye, I will immediately go grab it. I absolutely love sci-fi fantasy, and it doesn't matter if it's a new author or a one that I've read before. I kind of follow blogs and stuff that will pitch indie authors, and a lot of times now that I'm an indie author, I really, really like to read indie author books because I feel like that more indie authors should get noticed than do. And I try to help I'm on social media, like on TikTok and stuff, and Book Talk. And Book Talk a lot of times has a tendency to promote published authors. And so it's really cool when I see all these indie authors on there that are trying to get traction. And so I'm a big fan of reading. If I see an indie book that even if I don't know the author, I'll give it a chance. Especially I'm in Kindle Unlimited, so you can go read however many you want at that point, as long as they're in Kindle Unlimited. So it's mostly if it just strikes my fancy. I'm not really particular. Brandon Sanderson probably is the biggest that if I saw he had a new book, I would immediately go grab his book. But other than that, it's just whatever strikes my interest. If I see it and I like it, I'll grab it. So
Love that. What would you tell someone just starting out with reading again?
so sometimes I think I actually had a friend that just started reading again. And I think one of the biggest things is to not rush yourself when you're first starting, because some people are super speed readers, right? And they can just breeze through a book, especially romance readers. Romance readers can read books like nobody's business. And I think the most important thing is to your own speed and your own comfort and what level you're absorbing the book. So first of all, go at a pace you're comfortable with. Also, the other thing is that there is literally a book out there for everyone. There's so many books on so many topics, probably any topic you could possibly want to read about. There is something you can read about it and that you would probably enjoy. So I think a lot of times I've had people tell me, oh, I don't read because there's nothing that interests me or not a topic that I like that I want to read. And I'm like, you haven't looked hard enough then, because I guarantee you there's something out there for you. But yeah, just to be patient and to try to find something, because if you enjoy it and it interests you and piques your curiosity, you're more tempted to finish it, right? So those are my two biggest pieces of advice, I think.
Love that. On the other side of that, what would you tell someone just starting to write their own book?
Um, yeah, there's some similarities to what I would say for that too. So first of all, the number one thing and it is that I think everybody needs to realize there's so much advice out there from so many authors and so many people that have done it. But the thing is that every single person is different. And so what might work for one person may not work for you. And you have to kind of like cookie cutter everything and figure out what works for you and take things like with a grain of salt and kind of just find your own way. It's great to get advice from people, but you just have to bear that in mind that, you know, what worked for them might not work for you. Now, for me personally, what I recommend is writing every single day. And I know not everybody does that, but I think that habit is key. It's like building a muscle. And that even like I say, even if you sit down for 20 minutes and you write 20 words, you've written something for the day. If you sit down and you write 2 words and you're sitting there thinking about your book the entire time, at least you're like brainstorming, right? And you're getting thoughts out and you're kind of figuring out your book in your head. But you sat down. It's the whole idea of, you know, you sat down, you made the conscious effort to show up, and then also to keep record of it. So what I do, I have like a spreadsheet that I set up to keep track of my word count and then how I felt I did that day. I have a like number ranking system of like how was the quality I felt, what was my mood, and then I write like notes as far as like was there something going on that impacted how this went today. And it's really good. I know like not everybody is data driven like that, but it's still good just to hold yourself accountable to be able to look back at it and be like, okay, well, I had these few days where I was really in a bad mood and I didn't write as much, but then all of a sudden, look, I got an upward swing and I'm back at it again. And then it's also important to like write in those notes too when you have a day where you don't write as much, but you were sitting there and thinking about the book half the day and you made a lot of progress with like brainstorming and stuff. So yeah, that would be my biggest pieces of advice is writing every day consistently, to help keep that muscle going and to keep a routine and showing up, and then also keeping track of what you do. And I also do sprints, which I do like 25 minutes worth of writing and then take a 5-minute break, and then I do it 4 times and then take an hour, or not an hour break, maybe an hour, I can't remember what I do, something. I take a longer break. And that is really helpful too, because the timer, when you hit the timer and it's like, okay, it's going, like something about that just makes your brain just go, okay, it's time to focus. So I really, really highly recommend that too. But yeah, that's pretty much my big pieces of advice.
Love that. What's one thing that people are generally surprised to find out about you?
So my biggest thing that no one ever notices, and I have to point out, but I love pointing it out. So I'm deaf in my right ear. I was born with a birth defect called congenital atresia and microtia, so I have no external ear, and so I can hear very faintly sounds, through like bone conduction and stuff, but I don't have the ability for the sounds to go through my ear. And that's been my whole life. And my ear looks different. But like I will geek out with people. I'll be like, look, and I had it reconstructed, so it's really cool to show people how it worked, because that surgery only has like a 40% success rate, so it was kind of a pretty big deal that it worked and it looks as good as it does. So I like to nerd out and tell people that, because I was gonna be an audiologist for a long time, which is they dispense hearing aids and do hearing testing, and I was working with veterans, of all things. That's what I do now with marketing, is work with veterans. Interestingly enough, I really like working with the veteran population. But yeah, so I love telling people that little factoid about me because it makes me pretty interesting, I think. And then I guess another little random factoid about me is my uh, dad's side of the family. There's a lot of famous musicians on my dad's side of the family, and I do not sing out in public. I can sing, but I just don't choose to sing in public like the rest of my family. Much to their disappointment, I decided to be a writer and be a turtle and stay in my office and write. And I play some instruments too. So that I play the latest instrument I'm trying to learn is the cello. So I really enjoy music a lot, which is interesting being deaf in one ear because it's a little bit of a different experience for me as a musician. But yeah, those are probably two just interesting facts about me, I guess.
Love that. Those are so amazing. Is there anything you would like to say or add?
Sure. So I just have to pitch this. This is book related. So I mentioned before that my book is released in ebook, blah. But and as we talked about, I'm gonna probably come in and talk about this with my narrators. But we have a full cast narrated audiobook that released in tandem with the ebook for Obedience. And I have published 26 books since I started publishing in 2017. And a lot of those were also audiobooks. And I have not once ever said that an audiobook was better than the ebook. But in this one particular case for this book, the audiobook is absolutely better than my ebook and paperback. And I am not ashamed of that at all. It is absolutely fabulous. And we also learned the other day through social media that our audiobook is also what they call dramatized, which means we have sound effects in our audiobook. We have music in certain scenes. The scenes are enhanced in certain scenes, and some of the steamier scenes are extra steamy, for lack of better. they're entertaining. And yeah, we just worked really hard on it. I've had several people that have never picked up an audiobook that ARC'd the audiobook or went and bought it. And they've come back just super excited. They're like, I've never listened to anything like this before. It's so cool. And I tell people, even if you turn on your TV and are entertained, you probably will be entertained by our audiobook. So I highly, highly recommend the audiobook. If they haven't checked it out yet, you might want to. It's pretty cool. But yeah. That's my biggest pitch. That's all I really wanted to add was that, because I know I talk up my regular book, but the audiobook is pretty freaking cool. So
Love that. Where's the best place for readers to find your book? I know some readers love signed copies. Is that an option and the best place to connect with you?
sure. So if they want to find my book is available in ebook, paperback, hardback, and full cast narrated audio. All of it is on Amazon. It's exclusive through Amazon, both the audiobook and the ebook and paperback. So you can find it on Amazon. You can also find the audiobook on iTunes and Audible. So if you wanted to listen to the audiobook, that's where you could find those. And then if you wanted a signed paperback, my best suggestion, I don't have anything set up formally, but if you get in contact with me through my website, which is lizasnowauthor.com, you can just fill out the contact sheet and it'll alert me and I can send you a paperback that way. We can work it out. But I am fully intending to have that on my website soonish, but it just hasn't happened yet. But yeah, maybe by the time this airs, it'll be up. But yeah, if it isn't, just send me an email and I will get you hooked up.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here today. We're so grateful we got to interview you. We'll be sure to drop those links in the show notes. That way everyone can find you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I greatly appreciate it.